My grandfather, like millions of others, smoked cigarettes. He trusted the ads, the ones like these, with doctors with white coats and celebrities on billboards, all assuring him that smoking was okay, maybe even good for you. I mean, why wouldn't he? Science hadn't proven it otherwise. At least, that's what he was told. My grandfather died at the age of 39 in 1969 due to cancer caused by smoking. And he wasn't alone. Millions of other people smoked cigarettes in the 20th century when its peak production in the 1970s and 1980s. But did we know the effects of smoking? Yes. The first scientific research article on smoking and cancer was released in 1950. 4 years later, in 1954, American researchers nearly confirmed it, with a case of over 200,000 people. Smoking caused cancer. Now, a fundamental truth about science is that it is a process. It is not a singular event. Discoveries build over time, and certainty requires years and years of data collection and validation. So what did the industry do with this time? They fought science with science. They told the general public and government that anything but smoking was the real problem. Asbestos, radioactive materials, air pollution, what city you lived in, your demographic. And by constantly raising these questions, they gave the illusion that science was uncertain. It wasn't until 1964 when the Surgeon General report labeled Smoking and Health was released. This was done by a variety of different organizations, including the US Food and Drug Administration, the American Medical Association, the Federal Trade Commission, of over 7,000 peer-reviewed scientific studies. Smoking caused cancer. What came out of this remarkable and condemning report? Congress required warning labels on the sides of cigarette packages. Still, cigarette ads were everywhere, and with this, a shift in personal responsibility. Smoking is a choice. You need to go to the store, buy a pack of cigarettes, open it, put it in your mouth, and light it. At any time, you can stop. It took nearly 60 years for the FDA to finally regulate tobacco as an addictive and health-concerning drug, the same regulations that we see today. Now, the tobacco crisis is not just a lesson in public health. It is a case study on how powerful industries can manipulate science, government, and public opinion to protect their profits and increase production. Let's fast forward to today. Different product, same story. This time, replace tobacco with plastic. Most of us have seen the ads, the ones that what you can expect from plastic, that plastics make things possible, that recycling is a solution to plastic pollution, and that this pollution hurts all of us, and that people start pollution, people can stop it. And the numbers are staggering. We produce over 400 million tons of plastic every single year. It has been found in the depths of our oceans, to the highest peaks in our mountains, and is littered on our cities, streets, and beaches. But just like tobacco, did we know the cause of our production? Yes. The first scientific research article on plastic pollution was published in 1969, the same year my grandfather died from smoking. Kenyon, while studying seabirds off the coast of Hawaii, found that over 75% had ingested plastic materials in their stomach. Tiny, synthetic, man-made material was infiltrating nature itself. 3 years later, other independent researchers on the Atlantic Ocean found another disturbing truth. Plastic was not only in seabirds, but also in our marine environments, becoming a permanent fixture. Now, this is back when the world was only producing about 35 million tons. That's a fraction of today's output. Since then, a variety of numerous reports, including the United Nations in 1997, Greenpeace in 2006, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in 2016, and our own United States just 3 years ago in 2022, all showcasing that what we are doing with plastic production isn't sustainable, it's harming our environment, and that plastics need to be redesigned. What came out of these reports? The introduction of recycling. Reduce, reuse, recycle. And with this, a shift in personal responsibility. But the issue with plastic is that it is not a choice. I could challenge each and every single one of you from the moment you wake up in the morning not to interact with plastic. Most of us in this room, myself included, wouldn't make it out of bed. Your mattress, your pillow, your comforter, your sheets, your toothbrush, your toothpaste container, your toilet, the clothes you're wearing are all made out of plastic. I could challenge each and every single one of you to go into a grocery store and find one item that doesn't have a plastic on it. Even individual apples have plastic stickers on them. Now, to put 400 million tons of plastic production into perspective, that's like the equivalent weight of the entire human population produced in plastic every single year. All 8 billion of us. By the time I finish this talk, 25 million pounds of plastics will have been produced. That's almost the same amount of plastic that enters the ocean every single minute. Where does all this plastic go? I think a lot of us know the answer to that question. 50% of it ends up in landfills, creating plastic mountains. 23% is mismanaged, being unconventionally burned and littered into our cities, streets, and beaches. And 19% is incinerated, releasing greenhouse gas emissions like methane and carbon dioxide. When we talk about a circular economy, less than 10% of all plastics today are recycled. Of all this plastic we produce, 99% of it all comes from fossil fuels, a non-renewable feedstock that takes millions and millions of years to be produced from the heat and pressure of decaying plants. Now let's look at this from a greenhouse gas emission standpoint. The plastic manufacturing industry accounts for nearly 5% of our total greenhouse gas emissions. By 2050, some studies have shown that this could account to nearly 20%, accelerating a climate crisis at our current rate. What was our solution to all of this? Recycling. First introduced in 1974 and further solidified in 1988 with the now familiar resin identification codes. All of us in this room have seen these numbers, 1 through 7, with the famous chasing arrows symbol. The arrows suggest recyclability, but they are nothing more than a marketing ploy. Some, like polyethylene terephthalate, number 1, or high-density polyethylene, number 2, have had some limited success in recycling streams. But most others, like polyvinyl chloride, number 3, polystyrene, number 6, and mixed plastics or other, number 7, were practically doomed from the start, rarely recycled, and often destined for the environment. But did we know this? Yes. Industry leaders have leaked internal documents from the 1970s and 80s showcasing that recycling is neither economically viable nor technologically feasible at our current rate of production. Yet they sold this lie to us anyway. Now, unlike glass, precious metals, and aluminum, which are widely and successfully recycled today, the problem with plastic recycling is that it requires clean and properly sorted waste. Contamination from food or other residues make plastics unrecyclable, mixed materials can't be separated, and additives like dyes and plasticizers further complicate reprocessing. As a result, most plastics today don't actually get recycled. Less than 10% globally, and that falls down to 5% here in the United States. But this isn't the information that we were told. We felt good about throwing our plastic into the blue bin, watching it every week getting picked up by our local garbage truck. That we were doing our part and the industry was doing theirs. But the evidence piling up today tells a very different story. The issue doesn't end with plastic recycling. The plastic that we throw away never really goes away. It ends up on our cities and our streets. It makes plastic environments. It's found in great continents of plastics in our oceans. And over time, these plastics break down into smaller and smaller pieces, becoming micro and nanoplastics. And we are now just discovering the health impacts of these and our production. It contaminates our food, our soil, and our waterways. Plastics are quite literally everywhere. And more recently, in the human system. Microplastics have been found in the human placenta, in our human bloodstreams, in our liver, in our arteries, and just earlier this year in 2025, in the human brain. Scientists have linked this increase in exposure to increased inflammation, hormone disruption, reproductive harm, increased risk of heart attacks and strokes, and neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia. The industry's promise was never about sustainability. It was about shifting responsibility onto you, the consumer, while improving the image of plastic and continuing production. The system isn't broken. It was just never designed to work. Now, we have seen how powerful industries like the tobacco industry can manipulate science, government, and public opinion to maintain production and increase profits. But history also shows us another thing, that people, when united, can create change. Look at what happened with the tobacco industry. It didn't change because they had a change of heart. It changed because people spoke up. Independent scientists told the truth, doctors shared the evidence, and people demanded change. We are now at that same inflection point with plastic. We get to decide on whether the plastic pollution crisis becomes a case study on industry manipulation or an example of how people can come together and create change. We as scientists are doing our part by transitioning from a linear plastics economy, working from our non-renewable resources and our waste streams, to a more circular economy, introducing renewable resources, making the same plastic products we know and love, and instead of relying on the recycling streams, focusing on compostable and biodegradable plastics that don't persist in the environment. From my work on renewable and biodegradable polyurethanes, one of the 6 most produced plastics to date, designing them to be fully renewable and compostable with real-world applications and not persistent in the environment at the end of their life. Other groups are working on things like polylactic acid, PLA, or polyhydroxyalkanoates, or PHAs, as viable replacements to plastic production. We're also using things like agricultural waste feedstocks, such as lignin, to create new materials. We are innovating materials every day to be made from renewable resources and not persist in our environment. Even more so, 125 countries have implemented some sort of national level bag or taxation ban on plastic bags. Here in California, just a few years ago in 2022, we passed Bill SB 54, banning certain types of plastic in our production streams. Progress might feel slow, but it is happening. So here's my challenge to you. We don't need everyone in this room to live a perfect plastic-free life. We need millions of people to try, to rethink what we buy, to ask better questions, and demand transparency from those we buy from. Demand transparency and talk about this issue. Conversation is one of the most powerful tools that we have. If each of us does a little bit, it adds up. If each of us does a little more tomorrow, it could change everything. My grandfather didn't know the truth about smoking until it was too late. We don't have that excuse. We do know, and now it's up to us to act. Because the plastic story isn't over. But the question is, will we quit in time? Thank you.